In this video, I'm going to talk all about birth parents. Birth parents in the foster care world can be a very challenging subject because sometimes they can be difficult. Foster parents sometimes forget what their role is with birth parents. And so I'm going to break this into two parts. Part one is going to be all about visits with birth parents and how to manage that. And then in part two, I'm going to talk about building relationships with birth parents. But I want to start off with this big statement. And the big statement is this. Foster care is all about reunification. If the goal is reunification, then our job as foster parents is to help in that process in any way we can. Now, that's going to look different, but just understand that means that if we can help the birth parent with their case plan, if we can help guide the birth parent, if we can encourage the birth parent, if we can do anything to help that birth parent along the way during this journey of reunification, then that's our job. And I know that there's a bunch of people that are going to just shut this video off right now. And I'm sorry, but the goal is reunification. So our goal is not only to take care of these precious children that didn't do anything wrong, but to help put them back in that family unit. Because again, that's the goal. Now, if that can't be achieved, then we go a different route. But until proven that that can't be achieved, that's our job. And so if I upset you, I'm sorry. But it is the way the system is set up. And so a lot of foster parents know that their job is to take care of the kids, but they forget our job is to support the birth parents also. And again, I'm going to spend a lot of time in the next video on this because there's some challenges that come along with that. Not every birth parent you're not going to be able to help every birth parent, but our goal is to want to. Now, if it's possible or not, that's a different story. But again, in this video, I really want to talk about visits because visits are challenging for foster parents in so many ways, and we're going to talk about all of those. But why, lots of foster parents say to me on a pretty regular basis, I don't understand why we have to have visits because it seems like nobody's happy at the end. And so it just seems like a complete waste of time. And I completely understand that. And sometimes it feels that way. But here's why visits are important. Because again, reunification is important. And so getting the children back is the motivation for the birth parent. And imagine if they never get to see the motivation. How motivating is that? It's not. And so the goal is to keep that relationship, keep that bond between birth parent and child, along with helping that birth parent to remember why they're working on what they're working on. And trust me, birth parents have to overcome some pretty major things. Look, drug addiction is one of the really big reasons why children come into foster care, and getting over a drug addiction is very difficult. And so they're going to need lots and lots and lots of encouragement to overcome that addiction. And so having the kids around is important. So for those that are new, what does a visit look like? Well, here's the problem. Every county does it a little bit differently. And so I am only going to speak from the way our visits went. Your visits may go slightly different, but in a sense, the principles are the same. The logistics may change a little bit. So all of our foster children had a visit once a week for 4 hours. One of them had a 3-hour visit. One of them was a 4-hour visit. So once a week, it was a visit for 4 hours. And so the way it would work is ours was Wednesdays at, I think, if I remember right, 4 o'clock. And so I would pick our kids up from school, and I would take them to the visit center. And the way ours worked is I would go into the visit center with our foster children, and then the birth parent would come into the visit center. There would be a handoff. They would go back. They were supervised. So they would go back with a supervisor, and then they would have their time to spend with each other. And then when the 4 hours was up, I would come back. I would go back into the lobby. The supervisor would bring the birth parent and the foster children back to me. The handoff would happen again. We would leave, and we would go our separate ways. And so you can already see there are all sorts of challenges with this. Now, in another county that's close to us, the foster parent comes in a back door, drops the kids off. The birth parent comes in a front door, and so they never see each other. And so that might be your case, but the way ours worked is we physically saw each other at every visit. And so that can feel awkward. And understand, it's awkward on both sides. It's going to feel awkward for you, the foster parent, but imagine the birth parent. Put yourself in their shoes. Somebody has your kids, and you don't know them from Adam, and you don't know if they're treating them well or not treating them well. And so just remember that it may feel awkward for you, but put yourself in that birth parent's shoes, and you'll understand that it's awkward for them. Lots of things can happen at visits. And so, I hear all sorts of complaints about foster parents say, they bring a bunch of cookies and candy, or they rile them up, and so on and so forth. And my wife has a great way of explaining this. And I think if you think in these terms, even though it's challenging for you, if you think in these terms, it will help you. If you could only see your children for 4 hours once a week, wouldn't you give them everything that they wanted? Because I would. I can just tell you, I would give them whatever they wanted. If they loved McDonald's, I'd bring McDonald's every single time. If they loved candy, I would bring massive amounts of candy, and I would let them eat, because all I want to do is make them happy, because I only get 4 hours with them, and that's it. That is the extent of my relationship, and I'm going to make the most of that 4 hours. Now, for foster parents, that's difficult, because now you have a kid that's high on sugar, right? Bouncing off the walls, and you got to deal with them. So I get it. Or, you have a nice healthy, you have a dinner made, and they fed them McDonald's, and now they don't want to eat, and their schedule's all off, and at 8 o'clock they're hungry again, and so it's frustrating, and I get it. It is. But remember, if you only had your kids for 4 hours once a week, what would you do? Because I know what I would do. I would give them whatever they want. The other part about visits that's tough is the drive to visit and the drive away from visit. So the drive to visit, your foster children, there's a lot of anticipation. They're nervous, they're excited, they're concerned, and so you're going to see a difference in behavior a lot of times on the way to visit. And on the way from home from visit, a lot of times you're going to see massive changes in attitude, behavior, all sorts of that type of things. And so, part of the reason why is because they just spent 4 hours of what seems like should be fun, but very stressful time. Now, if you have really young ones, so probably if you have foster children 5 or under, they're not going to experience as much what I'm about to talk about. But if you have foster children that are 5 or above in age, they're going to experience this. And so one of the challenges that foster children have at birth visits is they can't be too happy about where they're at, but they can't be too sad at the same time. And nobody knows where that line is. So let me explain. They can't be too happy about living with you and the things that you can provide, because then that puts down their parent, and they don't want to put down their parent. They don't want to make their parent feel bad. But at the same time, they can't make it sound like it's too bad, because then their birth parent might complain about you and they may get removed. They're smart enough to know that they may get removed if they complain too much about you. And so imagine living in a world where you have to constantly be thinking about not making it seem too great, but not making it seem too bad, and figuring out where the middle is, and nobody really knows where the middle is. Imagine for doing that for 4 hours and how stressful that must be. That I can't even imagine putting myself in that situation, but that's what many children in foster care have to deal with. Now, if they're 5 and under, they're going to say all sorts of stuff. And they're going to talk about all the great things, and they're going to talk about when you punish them, and when you discipline them, and when you said no. And that, in a lot of times, in a lot of cases, is going to make a birth parent angry, uneasy, jealous. There's a host of emotions. And so understand that when you leave that visit, if the birth parent's demeanor is different, because they're processing all of these things that they can't give to their children right now, and they're processing that. And so there's a grieving that's going on in both cases. Now, I can also tell you when you're leaving, a lot of times your foster children are going to have a meltdown because they don't want to leave. And so you're going to have to deal with this meltdown, and you're going to have to deal with them crying and acting out, because it's sort of like giving a kid a toy and then taking it away from them again. And imagine those emotions. And so I promise you're going to put them in the car, you're going to strap them in, and you're going to drive away, and you're going to be thinking to yourself, is this really worth it? And you have to remember, it is. It's part of the process, because if we want reunification, we need this to happen. Even though it can be difficult and painful, building a relationship with the birth parent will all make this an easier transition. And so, again, I'm going to talk a lot about that in the next video, because that will make all of this easier. Now, there's one last thing I want to talk about visits, and I hope this never happens to you, but I promise the statistics say it happens to almost everybody. And that is when birth parents don't show up for the visit. You drive to the visit center, you drop them off, and the birth parent never shows up. And then you have to take this child home. And let me tell you, this child, your children, your foster children are going to be scared, because they're going to worry about, are they okay? Why didn't they show up? Don't they love me anymore? And very seldom are there good reasons why birth parents don't show up. But they don't. And sometimes it's just emotionally, they're overwhelmed with emotion. Birth parents know that many times that they're drug tested at these visits. And so if they've been using, they're smart enough to know that they don't want to show up, because that's just going to drive one more nail in their coffin. And I know what you're probably thinking right now. Well, then just don't use. Well, if you've never been addicted to drugs, you don't understand how firm of a grasp drugs can have. And it takes an extremely strong person to overcome a drug addiction. And many, many, many people do. But it's not a light switch. You know, alcoholics are always alcoholics. Even when they stop drinking, they will always consider themselves an alcoholic. And so every single day, they're fighting that temptation to have a drink. And so your heart should feel for these people, because it is, look, nobody starts drinking or doing drugs to become addicted in any way, shape, or form. It happens, and typically it happens over time. And it happens in most cases very slowly, without people even realizing it's happening to them. And then once they're there, it's super hard. So I get it. This is where you're going to have to try to find compassion for the birth parent. And I promise finding compassion for the birth parent can be very difficult. But the only way you're going to survive this is to literally put yourself in their shoes. And that is very difficult to do. But let me just say this for all you people that are hating on me already. Holding people accountable and compassion are two totally different things. Compassion is feeling for them, caring for them, wanting them to do better. Being angry and being upset isn't not compassion. That's not being compassion. You can be angry, you can be upset. But compassion is trying to put yourself in their shoes, trying to understand their situation, trying to figure out how can I help them. That's compassion. But understand there's going to be anger. The other thing that's going to happen a lot of times at birth visits are bio parents are going to lie to their children about a host of things that you know aren't true. And as a foster parent, this is very difficult because you just want to say to your foster children when they tell you these lies, are you kidding me? You really think that's going to happen? And it can be big lies and it can be little lies. And here's what I have found to be true. The reason why the birth parent is lying is because most of the time that's what they want to be true. Now, it doesn't change it from not being a lie. But most of the time, that's what they want reality to be. So, here's the thing, little advice about lying, birth parents lying. You can't tell your foster children, oh, they're lying to you, because that just severs any relationship. And so, if they're older, you can say things like, does that make sense? You know, given what you know, does that all add up? Maybe you should ask your mom or dad more about that at the next visit. But again, you're not the one saying they're lying, because remember, that's their parents. And if you call them a liar, that makes your foster child a liar because they are a part of them. And so just keep that in mind. I'm telling you, visits are tough. But I will tell you this, I'll give you a little sneak peek. If you build a relationship with the birth parent, and I mean a really good relationship with the birth parent, visits can actually be wonderful. There's still trauma, there's still emotions that are attached to it, there's still a lot of things, but I promise it makes visits a whole lot better. But understand, visits are an extremely important part of the reunification process. And so, as frustrating as visits may be, understand that without visits, reunification is very difficult. And again, our job as foster parents is to take these two people and put them back together. Again, I know that it's not always possible, but I always say our heart should break when it's not. And then we do something different. But, Katie and I adopted two of our foster children. That day we adopted them was a beautiful day, but it was also a sad day because what was supposed to get put back together didn't. And so, yes, we were happy to add two people to our family, but we were also sad because a family got permanently split. And so, if you go in with that attitude, I promise this part of the process will become much easier. I hope you've enjoyed this content. Stay tuned for part 2. Part 2 will be next week. And again, if you like what you've seen, please subscribe, give me a thumbs up. And again, we'll see you next week.